Hello and welcome to BoardGameCast Season 2. And my name is Jesper Edmark, also known as Mordachai on BoardGameGeek, and this is my show where I present to you board games and full session of board games. I am today going to present you with Lords of Waterdeep, designed by Peter Lee and Rodney Thompson. Peter Lee has formerly worked on Heroescape. This is a game published by Wizards of the Coast, and it's set in the Dungeons and Dragons world of Forgotten Realms. But it is not, as many before me has pointed out, a dice fest with a lot of miniatures, which many expected, but instead it is a light strategy game, or Eurogame, through and through. This game borrows its mechanics from other games in the light strategy genre, most prominently Chaos, but in my humble opinion does so quite tastefully. I don't find the game very innovative, but it is quite good and it has a good theme. Lords of Waterdeep is a quick-paced game, so if you don't have time for one of the meteor titles but still want to play a worker placement game, then this is a good game to have in your collection. The great city of Waterdeep is secretly ruled by a council of lords, whose identities are hidden from the denizens as well as from the other players, aka lords of the council. While each of the lords strive to protect the city, they also have their own agenda, and the players assume control of one of these lords and try to become the most influential one over the course of the game. The lord, aka player, who succeeds the most and has the most victory points at the end of the game is the winner. And they do this by trying to do the quests that the different denizens of the city asks for. And if they do quests that coincide with their agenda, they get bonus points. What lord each player is randomized at the start of the game and only revealed at the end, and this is the framework of the Intrigue part of the game. While it generally doesn't pay to spend too much resources on subterfuge, in effect finishing missions that is not according to your agenda, it can be profitable if you manage to keep your opponents in the dark for a while regarding the identity of your lord, because the other players most likely will try to hinder you from getting the quest that you want to get. Each player starts the game with 2 to 4 agents, depending on the number of players, a small pool of gold, 2 active quests, 2 intrigue cards, and the hidden identity of their lord. Each round the players take turns placing one of their agents onto the board, gaining an immediate effect, and then having an opportunity to complete one of their active quests for a free action. You can only complete one quest per agent placed, and that is one reason that you don't want to gather adventurers throughout the game and just do all the quests you can at the end, because you have to place an agent to finish a quest, and you can only finish one quest per agent. Once all agents have been placed onto the board, the agents that were placed in the harbor is reassigned to still available locations, most similarly to the gate in Chaos. And then the round is over. Each player takes back their agents. The unbuilt buildings become more incentivized. In effect, the same way as that is done in Puerto Rico with unpicked rolls, except in this case it's victory points instead of coins. And the new round commences. Halfway through the game, each player receives an extra agent. So that is somewhat similar to the family growth action in Agricola. While the city is made of up of several districts. These do not directly influence gameplay. Instead, it is the certain locations printed on the board and on the purchasable buildings that are places the agents can visit to give their lord a benefit. In 4 of the printed locations, you recruit adventurers, of which there are 4 types: warriors, rogues, wizards, and clerics. The 5th resource in the game is gold, and that also has a specific location. The other printed locations gives you the starting player marker and an intrigue card, or the opportunity to play your intrigue cards and later reassign the agents, as I said earlier. The opportunity to purchase building, which is put into play for all to use, much the same as in Kalis. And finally, the opportunity to gain more active quests for your adventurers to complete. Each location can only be visited or worked by 1 agent each round, the same as the buildings in most worker placement games. But there are a few exceptions. There are certain powers in the game that let you put workers where other player has put the workers already. There are also a couple of places, the inn and the harbor, which have free action spaces each. And in effect, this is limiting the available choices in the game, and if you need a certain location or a certain effect, you better pick that effect up as early as possible. You might not be able to afford to wait. That said, there are several ways of utilizing spaces that other players have already placed their agents on. For instance, as we watch the first round get underway here, Henrik spent one of his intrigue cards that said that he could build a building, although I had already built a building through the action space that do that. There are also intrigue cards that let you place your agents on spaces where others already have their agents, and there are also a couple of effects, namely a building called the Source Star that has the same effect, as well as a quest that Jon eventually will pick up here that let him do that once a turn. The intrigue cards are what sets this game apart from many other light strategy games, because it's an element of direct interaction in the game. And what they do is that they give you a benefit while at the same time forcing you to give a lesser version of this benefit to one or all of your opponents. Or they force your opponents to discard one type of adventure, but if they cannot, you gain a benefit instead, so you might want to choose your timing there. The last type of intrigue card is mandatory quest, which is played on an opponent, and it's a direct take that effect that forces your opponent to complete that quest, which gives only a minor bonus before they can complete any other quest. The quests are the main way of gaining victory points in Lords of Waterdeep, and you complete the quest by assigning this quest-specific number of adventurers and gold to the quest, in effect spending them. And the completed quests give you a one-time reward of prestige gold and or adventurers, and are then laid face down in your completed quest pile. Certain quests, called plot quests, give continuous benefits and are placed on the right side of your player board, so all players can see the effect they give. At the end of the game, you gain bonus prestige for the quests that corresponds to your Lord's agenda. Jon is the first player to complete a quest in this particular session, and it was a plot quest. One thing that is good to do early game is to try and complete plot quests as soon as possible. Also, building buildings is quite powerful. To get some intrigue cards into your hand is always good, because that opens up the possibility of you placing on the harbor, which more or less gives you a bonus effect of that card, since you still get to reassign that agent later. The quests is also good to start trying to get certain quests into your active quest pool, so you have something to work against. Especially if you find the early plot quests that is good for your agenda, that is really good to try and get early. As you see, we have already wiped the board a couple of times. One of the in spaces let you wipe the board and then pick one quest. This is a mechanic that was found in, for instance, Thurnon Taxis. And we used it quite a lot this game. What you want to do is to try and set up some sort of engine. If you can get buildings out that will give you adventures you need for your agenda, when other players utilize that building, that is very good for you. Henrik starts here by getting out one of the better buildings into play. A building that every time someone places an agent on it, you receive 2 rogues, those are the black cubes, and 1 wizard, the purple cube. But Henrik, as the owner of that building, also gains his choice of either 1 rogue or 1 wizard. Several of the buildings let you have 2 gold or 2 points. More or less, the benefit of the buildings is half an action, up to 1 action each time an opponent places in your buildings. Of course, the effect of the buildings themselves are equivalent of 1.5 to 2 actions, so there is a trade-off. You are basically both gaining a half to 1 action every time an opponent places on your building, or vice versa. Since it's early in the game here, I would like to say that we have taken out the mandatory quests from the Intrigue deck in this session. That is because I feel that the mandatory quests are the weakest part of this game, at least for a group of players that is fairly new to the game. I have played it a few times here, and both June and Henrik have played this only this session so far. The secret agendas make it difficult to see who is actually winning the game. You do not know if the player that has the most points at the track at the moment is actually winning or not, because the secret agendas are one part, but also the quests and available adventures on each player's player board has so big of an effect for the endgame scoring. The mandatory quests thus becomes a kingmaker effect. The player that played the mandatory quests also gains nothing except for the ire of the victim, and most likely it is a third player that sails into the lead and wins the game because of the mandatory quest that was played. And I think we can all agree on the opinion that king-making mechanics are generally bad in games, and this is one of the more flagrant ones I have experienced. Some groups, of course, will have no problems with mechanics like this and might even like them, but my gaming groups are not among those. Because of this, we have decided to remove the mandatory quests from the game, at least for the moment. Maybe we will put them back in when we all feel familiar with the game. Maybe we won't. The Intrigue cards are powerful, but they are not the game-ending mechanic. You can definitely win the game without the use of the harbor and the Intrigue cards, but they give you an option, and they also give you uncertain elements so that the other players do not know exactly what you have available options-wise. The game is not devoid of luck elements. On the contrary, there are 3 major elements of luck involved in the game. First of all, you have the secret identity of your lord. There are 11 lords in the game, and 10 of these give you bonus prestige for quest completed out of 2 of the 5 quest types. And the quest types are connected to the different resources in the game. So skullduggery quests are connected to rogues. They always demand at least 1 or 2 rogues. The warfare quests always demand warriors. The piety quests always demand that you have a few clerics, and the arcana quests always demand that you have wizards. The 5th resource is of course gold, and that is connected to the commerce quest that always demands that you spend a certain amount of gold to be able to complete them. If the quests that come up in the available quest pool when you pick them up from the inn are not according to your agenda, you will have a harder time than if they are readily available for you. Also, if one of your opponents their agenda partly corresponds to your agenda, they are likely to compete for some of your quests, and that will make it more difficult for you. A player whose lord has an agenda that doesn't conflict with any of the other players will usually have an easier time to pick up the quests they want. Secondly, there are the Intrigue cards. Some of these will play directly into your hand, while others will be almost useless. This makes the actions where you gain Intrigue cards a gamble, and especially the late game. But one could argue that taking out the mentor quest mitigates this somewhat, since they all will give you one benefit or another. Lastly, there are the randomness in what buildings are available. The buildings come in a pile, and when one building is bought, another takes its place. If the buildings have effects that are very good for your agenda, the quest you want, then that is great. But if they are seemingly out of sync with your agenda, then you are out of luck. Of course, you can build them and hope that they correspond to your opponent's agenda, so they will use them often. But then you help them along, and you gain adventures and or goal that are not that needed for your own agenda. So that is also one luck element. Purchasing buildings are very worthwhile, and I would go so far to say that a player that does not build many buildings or build as often as they can will have a very small likelihood of being able to win the game. It's since you in effect gain actions each time another player uses your building. Building buildings is a way to gain more actions, and it's one of the few ways to do that in the game. One thing that is quite interesting as we see that the game is coming along here is that at the end of the game you gain bonus points for your remaining adventures and your remaining gold. Each adventure you have on your player board at the end of the game is worth 1 victory point, and each 2 gold rounded down at the end of game is also worth 1 victory point. So that is, you can always calculate how many points you spend for a quest in regards to the gains or the spoils that quest have. If you spend 4 adventurers and 4 gold, that is the same as spending 6 victory points. And if the reward is, say, 12 victory points, as well as 2 gold back, then you have made a net gain of 7 points. So it's quite easy to see how many points you spend in order to gain more points. The trick here is that the rogues and the warriors are more readily available than the wizards and the clerics. The basic actions and most of the advanced actions that give you adventures give you twice as many rogues and or warriors as they give wizards and clerics. So if you have effects that let you choose between, for instance, taking a wizard or a rogue, then most of the time you're better off if you take the wizard. And that again comes back to time. It takes more actions, thus more time to collect the wizards and clerics than it does collecting the rogues and warriors. We are getting along in the game here, and as you see, there has been many buildings built so far. Usually there are 1, maybe 2, in very few occasions, buildings built each round, and the game is consisting of 8 rounds, but we are in round 6 and we have already built 9 buildings. Also, Yoon has decided not to build many buildings at all. He decided to go for a plot quest driven strategy. He picked up a lot of plot quests, and both Henrik and me were quite afraid that those would kick in. But the thing with plot quests is that they give you lesser rewards of the one-time kind. They give you a continuous benefit, but the one-time benefit is lower than other quests. So you cannot go too far into the plot quests without losing headway. Of course, if you have plot quests that give you very good bonuses, then that will definitely be worth it in the end. Henrik is building a lot of buildings, and he has done mostly commerce quests, and the commerce quests, although they cost money, they almost always give you some money back, and that is very good if you want to build buildings. He has also gone into Arcana. He has picked up quite a lot of Arcana quests, and that was something that Yoon was not happy about, because it was pretty obvious that he had an agenda that meant he wanted to have Arcana quests. He also had quite a few piety quests completed, so we had deduced pretty fast that he wanted Arcana piety. I had gone heavily into the warfare quests, so they all knew that I wanted those. They had cycled out a few quests that were warfare quests. Neither of the other players here wanted those. I also wanted skullduggery quests, which I think was not that apparent from the picks I made. Although, if you look at the moment, I have quite a lot of skullduggery that is not in my active quest. That is in my active quest pool, so I guess that they knew at this point. Henrik was the enigma here. We did not really know what he was striving for. We were pretty sure that it was something with commerce, and since we had picked up quite a few Arcana quests as well, we both believed that he was commerce and Arcana. That was his agenda, and that was something that that was a bit tricky here, because he was building so many buildings that he might be the lord that want to do that, and we all knew that if that was the case, we were in big trouble, because the agendas say that each quest that corresponds to your agenda gives you 4 bonus victory points, but the lord that wants to build a lot of buildings give 6 extra points for buildings per building. While normally it's much more difficult to build enough buildings for that to give a higher bonus than the normal agendas. In this case, Yoon almost built no building at all, which meant that it was between me and Henrik building the buildings, and I did not have the money to build what I wanted to build. Henrik had a very good economy, and he could build whenever he wanted, so he gained a lot of buildings, and as you see, we have already built more than the available spots on the board. And that is one thing that I might mention here, that you can build more buildings than there are spots on the board. You are, however, restricted by how many markers of your color there are. I believe there are 12 markers for each player. You can only build 12 buildings per player, although that is quite unlikely to happen. Henrik was close this game though. We are getting closer to the end of the game here. It's round 7. And as you see, Henrik has taken quite a good lead here, 23 points over me. And you might think that that means that it will be hard to catch up to him, but that is not really the case. And as you see, I did 1 quest and was past him by 2 points. The biggest quests in the game give you 25 points, and there are 1 of each type. And if you manage to get one of those that also corresponds to your agenda, that's 29 points in 1 quest. So that is quite good. You tend to have people jump up in victory points quite a lot at the end in Lords of Waterdeep. That is also one thing that makes it hard to determine who is actually winning the game, since since you have such a jump at the end, then you cannot really see who is doing the best at any given moment. You might notice that there are a couple of oddly colored pawns or agents in the game here. One of them is on my playboard, and it's a very light green color. That is the lieutenant. It's a plot quest in the warfare pile that basically gives you an extra agent, but it gives you no points, and it's quite costly to complete. It's still a very good quest. I believe I got it in the end of round 4, so that meant I had 5 extra actions, since you can put it into play the same round that you finish that quest. On the other hand, there are the white pawn, and that is connected to one of the buildings, and that is the ambassador. The ambassador lets you put one of your agents, instead of doing action this turn, you make that agent do an action, the very first thing that happens in the next turn. And the next turn it also gets to do its own action. The extra action is symbolized by the ambassador. So if you are the first player, you get to do 2 actions in a row if you have the ambassador. So it's a very good building. I was the one who built it here, and each time an opponent takes that building, you gain 2 victory points. And I believe that I think I never got to take it myself, but I gained 8 or 10 victory points over the course of the game for it, so that was quite good. We have all passed 100 points, but Henrik is still in the lead here by quite a few points, while Jon is lagging behind. He has quite a few adventures, and he has some money, but he doesn't have that many active quests, so it's not looking that good for him at this moment in time. What you saw there was him picking up a quest and then completing it immediately, and that is perfectly allowed, since you do your agent action and then have the opportunity to finish one of your active quests. And if you take a quest with your agent, it is put in your active quest pool before you decide what quest you are interested in completing. One thing I mentioned was that several of the Intrigue cards, but also some of the quests are having effects not only for you, but for your opponents as well. Some of the Intrigue cards, for instance, have the effect that it gives you a certain kind of adventure, and then the opponents have the opportunity to sell you adventures. Most of the time they are given victory points, but they can also be given money, and those effects are given from the bank. So the player who played the card gains, for instance, 2 warriors, and then if the opponent want to give you more warriors, they can give you 1 each. Then they are given an effect from the bank, so you both benefit from it. Of course, the extra warrior that you gain from an opponent can make it easier for you to complete a quest. But at the same time, the effect of selling that adventure is often a very high rewarding effect. So, the end of the game, non-completed quests in the active pools are taken away out of the game. Your plot quests are added to your completed quest pile, and then you calculate the bonus points. After that, you go through your hidden agendas and see how many bonus points you get. And what Henrik does here is that he is revealing the builder, and he gains a total of 206 points after that. I end up with 204 points, and Jon was lagging behind quite significantly in the end and ended at 170. And you will see this momentarily here. it's an interesting game. I like it for what it is. It is a lighter strategy game, a lighter worker placement game. It has quite a few random elements, so if you are not one to like that, then you will probably not like this game very much. But it is certainly well worth having in most collections, I say. It's also a breath of fresh air, so to speak. It's take a lot of mechanics from other games, Caelus, Agricola, Puerto Rico, but it's certainly doing it in a good way. I would highly recommend this game to any player who likes worker placement games. And this one has a little more direct influence over the other players as well, so that is very nice. However, I still recommend you to taking out the mandatory quests from the Intrigue deck, since they are the weak part of this game, in my opinion. I have spoken quite a lot over the course of this video about the game itself and different parts of it, and I did not go into detail about the gameplay at all, almost. And I know that some of my viewers do not like that, and I apologize to you. This was well, a type of first session video, since both my opponents here have never played the game before, and it's also quite new to me, so I did not feel that I could give you a very deep insight to the strategy of the game. I believe or think that looking weak is or presenting yourself as weak is a good thing in Lords of Waterdeep, because there are a lot of hidden information in the game, and if you can manage to downplay your strength, that is something that you would probably benefit from. You can always use diplomacy of sorts by complimenting your opponents on their clever plays and strong positions, especially since the Intrigue cards often force players to give a small benefit to one opponent, and if you are friendly to opponents and tell them that they are doing very good, then you might be more likely to be the one that receives that benefit. One thing I would like to say is that I feel that this game is better when played by more players. It's a 2 to 5 player game, and I feel that the 4 players or 5 players are the best numbers for this game, because it just feels more interactive that way. On the other hand, you have less control when there are more players, so that is a downside to it. But I still think it's better with 4 or 5 than it is with 2 or 3. In the end here, I hope that you enjoyed this session and this video. We enjoyed the game. There are more videos coming out again. I have had a longer hiatus than I wanted. I wanted it to be 3 weeks, but I believe it's 5 weeks now. And that is because of some technical problem the last week here, and I apologize for that as well. The next episode will be of an older game, the game of Attica, and I hope you will enjoy that as well, although it's a bit older. And after that, we'll see what happens. I will still try to keep the schedule of one episode a week, at least for the beginning of this season. I'm having a vacation in 1 week, so I'll hopefully have a little more time to put into these videos. And I hope to see you next time, and until then I bid you farewell. Bye bye.